alcohol-free beverages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Field Alcohologist. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. It's just going to be me for a shorter version of the podcast. And I'm going to talk a little bit about drinking as it relates to the COVID-19 crisis. Specifically, I'd like to talk about how drinking has changed in the short term, and then perhaps discuss what it might look like in the future as we move into whatever the new normal is after this thing ends, because right now it doesn't look like there's going to be much of an end in sight. I'm actually coming to you from my house, but the background is the Frolic Room in Los Angeles, famous Bukowski bar in Hollywood. And while I'm on that topic, I'd like to encourage you to take a look at our website, www.thefieldalcohologist.com, where we have all the podcast episodes, all the videos, as well as blog material that's a little bit different, and where I've written some commentaries and essays and things like that. So anyway, please go ahead and check that out. If you like the content on any of our videos, including our most recent video where we did a really nice kind of interview with Austin Lucas, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. All right, so how did COVID change drinking? Well, one of the first things is it looks like drinking increased pretty exponentially at the beginning of the virus. So when the lockdowns hit, alcohol sales spiked, and it was widely reported in the media that alcohol sales had gone up by as much as 55% nationally. And the alcohol industry itself had to scramble to kind of figure out how to offset the closure of bars and restaurants and people not wanting to leave their homes to go to liquor stores and grocery stores. And then, of course, in some locales across the country, liquor stores were closed, deemed non-essential. In other places, they were kept as essential. And so there was wide geographic variation there. At another level, you had kind of the small scale alcohol producers like the microbreweries or the craft breweries, craft distillers, those sorts of operations having to figure out what they could do. A lot of them actually, the distillers went into making hand sanitizer kind of to fill that need in the market. And some of them have gone back to producing regular kind of whatever they were producing, alcohol, spirit-wise. A lot of the brew pubs and microbreweries, craft breweries had a switch to a takeout model where you could come pick up growlers, crowlers, and product with a social distance. And then, of course, a lot of the bars and restaurants with bars or hotels with bars actually either closed completely or they ended up having to have a takeout service. And so in California, where I am, bars were permitted to actually have to-go alcohol beverages, which would never happen in the past. You usually only found that in places like New Orleans or party type cities where alcohol on the street was permissible and you could go into a bar, grab a drink and walk around with it. So those were some of the changes in the way the industry responded. The other thing you had going on is the major kind of alcohol retail outlets like Bevmo and the warehouse type stores set up very quickly home delivery, buying online, buy online and pick up. And so their business, I think, was impacted, but not as impacted as much as some of the bars and nightclubs. So we had this increase in drinking. And we had changes in the way alcohol is sold. And then we had closure of kind of public drinking establishments. So one result of that in the interim was a reduction in drunk driving. And I think it'll be pretty clear when the statistics come out that there has been a significant drop in drunk driving during the lockdown phase of COVID-19. And that is primarily because of several factors. One, people aren't driving as much, just in general. Two, they're not driving to and from private parties or bars and restaurants. And those two kind of factors probably reduced alcohol related fatalities quite a bit. And we'll see that in the statistics when they eventually come out. So what is it going to look like going forward? And this is a really interesting question. First of all, one of the questions that I've been asked several times is, do I think that the spike in drinking we've seen will continue? And my answer to that is probably not. I think as people go back to work and kind of return to some new normal, you'll see a reduction in drinking patterns that looked like something from before the pandemic. And there's a lot of evidence in the research literature that would point to this, including what we call maturing out. And so if you can look at how college students drink, the environment of going to college is conducive to heavy drinking. So when students end up leaving college and going into the work world, they have responsibilities, and all of a sudden now you have a job and bills and those sorts of things, and you can't drink at the same level that you were drinking at while you were in college. I think what we have going on here is a little bit different, but it's close enough to say that that's probably what is likely to happen when we get back to some kind of new normal. Now, if you think about why did this spike in drinking happen because during the epidemic, that's pretty straightforward. Two of the most commonly cited motivations for drinking are to alleviate boredom and to reduce stress. And so if you kind of think of being locked down, this is kind of an ideal situation for both those factors to thrive. People are stuck at home with their spouse, their kids, their family, their dog, all these things that they're not used to being around these folks every day, all day long. Their work life's been turned upside down. There's a high level of anxiety and uncertainty with having a job, the economic situation, health concerns. So all those things combined, along with the social isolation of not being able to see your friends and family members, would contribute to heavier drinking. So I think, again, as we start getting away from the lockdown phase of this and returning to a normal type of life, we're going to see those factors reduced and people kind of going back into more normal drinking patterns. On the drunk driving front, it's hard to say what's going to happen. I think that's a bit of a mixed bag. So on the one hand, I do think that bars and nightclubs will be severely restricted in the way they open, and perhaps places that people used to frequent all the time and go to a bar district aren't going to look the same in the future. How they'll look remains to be determined. I'll come back to that in a minute. But I don't think it'll look the same. That said, I think people will have a lot of pent-up energy and want to socialize again. There'll be more smaller gatherings at people's houses. And again, here we can look at the research. I've done several studies that have shown that BYOB events, house parties, small gatherings tend to actually be more wet, and that's an alcohol research term for people get more drunk because of several factors. One, there tends to be more alcohol available. Two, people tend to not have the level of restrictions that you'd have at a bar. In other words, a bartender is supposed to be kind of watching what you drink, or a server cuts people off. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it's supposed to happen. Plus, you have to pay for the alcohol round for round. So people are able to modify their behavior a little bit better in public settings than they are in private settings. So that begs the question, how do people get to and from these things? Now, for the last couple years, even though the evidence has been mixed on this, people have been embracing Rideshare. Now, rideshare might be a struggling industry as we go forward. The likelihood of somebody wanting to get into someone else's car in the time of active transmission of COVID, um, it might really be the case that those kinds of services are not going to be used as much as they were for people who are intending to drink. On the designated driver front, which was what we kind of had before we had ride shares and the old grab a cab thing, um, the literature's mixed. It's hard to get designated drivers to stay sober sometimes. It kind of changes the dynamic in groups. So there's some things and strategies that people can use if we go back to that kind of an approach to reduce drunk driving or prevent drunk driving. But whether that happens or not remains to be seen. Um, so the rideshare thing's a big thing. The bar thing's a big thing. So I'm not sure what will happen with drunk driving. I think that's something we're going to have to watch. I will suggest that if you are going to start going to private parties when this all ends, that you designate the designated driver ahead of time and have some sort of agreement with that person of what that looks like. And typically what that will look like is no drinks or one drink, and that's it. And that person's going to have to stick to it, or you're going to have to stay there or ride share to get home safely. So, but how this plays out on the societal level remains to be seen. The next one is bars. What will bars look like in the future? And this is really a tough one because I'm not sure what they're going to look like in the future. The idea that a bar could enforce social distancing, having people 6 feet apart, is unrealistic if you've been in enough bars. Bars tend to be close, intimate places. There's different types of bars and clubs, of course, and dance clubs are different than small neighborhood bars and so on, and corporate bars. But how you get people to stay apart, you can't really wear a face mask if you're drinking. All those things are going to make return to normalcy in the bar environment very difficult. And there are people in the public health world, some of my colleagues, that would probably argue it's a good thing if we lose bars. I take a different slant on that. I think bars play an important role in the community. Places like the Frolic Room in the background are LA kind of legends, right? They're historic places in cities. And if a lot of people go to major cities and find bars that have been there throughout history and represent some very important times in the community. Historically, bars were a gathering place for people. They were places where politics got discussed. They were places where decisions got made. Bartenders back in the olden days used to be some of the most respected people in their community. A lot of that's changed over the years. Still, bars play a vital function, I would argue, both socially and economically in the community. And when done right, they can be both enjoyable and not necessarily risk factors for the greater good or public health problem. So that's another one that I think that we're going to have to see how everything plays out. So those are just a few of my thoughts on drinking related to COVID-19. Another final thought is that as the colleges decide how to go back, the extent to which college students are going to be able to socially distance and drink is very questionable in my mind. It's hard to get college students who are kind of still in this invincible phase of life to worry about their health and their drinking. And as several studies have shown, that once people start drinking, often those prevention type intentions get thrown out the window and replaced by other kinds of needs and motivations. So that is another potential big thing to watch in the coming years as we move out of the COVID situation. And with that, again, I hope you enjoyed this brief episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
quantity of the three beverages.